April 23, 1985, New York City, the Lincoln Center. One of the most famous buildings in the world. Inside, a man in a suit walks to a podium. His name is Roberto Goizueta. He's the CEO of Coca-Cola, and he's about to make the biggest mistake in the history of marketing. He leans into the microphone and announces calmly that Coca-Cola is changing its formula.
The best soft drink, Coca-Cola, is now going to be even better. Simply stated, we have a new formula for Coke.
For the first time in 99 years, the original Coke, the Coke your grandmother drank, your father drank, is gone. Just like that. In the audience, reporters are asking hostile questions. Questions they didn't write themselves. Pepsi planted them there.
I mean, are you 100% certain that this won't bomb, this new formula?
I think, as I said, I think this is the surest move ever because the consumer made it. We didn't.
Across town at PepsiCo headquarters, the champagne is already flowing. The CEO of Pepsi, Roger Enrico, has given his employees the day off. In his mind, the war is over. Coke has just surrendered. Spoiler, it wasn't over. Not even close. Because what happened next is one of the strangest stories in all of business history. A story of two pharmacists, about addiction and bankruptcy, about blind taste tests, billion-dollar celebrity endorsements, and a $1 million document that cited the gravitational pull of the Earth. This is Corporate Wars, and this is the Cola Wars. Part 1. Two Pharmacists. The Wounded Colonel. We have to go back, way back, to a pharmacy counter in Atlanta, Georgia in 1886. The Civil War has been over for 20 years. But for John Stith Pemberton, it never really ended. Pemberton was born in 1831 in Knoxville, Georgia. He became a doctor, then a pharmacist, and then a Confederate officer. He rose to the rank of lieutenant colonel. At the Battle of Columbus in April 1865, one of the very last engagements of the Civil War, he took a Union cavalryman's saber across his chest. The wound would never heal right, and the pain never went away. Like tens of thousands of Civil War veterans, he turned to the only thing that worked: morphine. But here's what made Pemberton different from most addicts. He's a trained chemist. He understood exactly what the morphine was doing to his body, and he was determined to find something better. Something that could kill the pain without killing him. His laboratory became an obsession. Coca leaves, cola nuts, rare oils, sugar, citric acid. He wasn't inventing a soft drink. He was inventing a cure. By 1885, he had something he called Pemberton's French wine coca. It was wine mixed with coca leaf extract and cola nut. People loved it. He marketed it for headaches, exhaustion, nervous disorders. He wasn't alone in that game. There was a French drink called Vin Mariani, a coca wine so popular that Pope Leo XIII carried a personal flask of it. Thomas Edison endorsed it. Ulysses S. Grant drank it near to the end of his life while dying of throat cancer. Coca wine wasn't some fringe product. It was mainstream medicine. Then, Atlanta passed prohibition legislation in 1886. No more alcohol. Pemberton had to get the wine out. He substituted sugar syrup. He kept the coca and the cola. And he added carbonated water. On May 8, 1886, he carried a jug of the new stuff down the street to Jacob's Pharmacy. They tried it. They liked it. They put it on sale for 5 cents a glass. In its first year, it sold about 9 glasses a day. 9 glasses a day. That was the beginning of the most valuable consumer brand in the history of the world. 9 glasses a day. The name came from his bookkeeper, a man named Frank Robinson. Robinson suggested Coca-Cola because 2 capital C's would look good in advertising. He also hand-lettered the flowing script logo. That logo has not fundamentally changed since 1887. The man who sold it for nothing. But here's the dark part. Pemberton never got to see what he'd created. He was sick, broke, and still addicted to morphine. He began selling off pieces of the company to cover his debts. On August 16, 1888, aged 57, Pemberton died of stomach cancer. By then, he had sold every last share. A businessman named Asa Griggs Candler bought complete control of the Coca-Cola Company. Total cost? Roughly $2,300. $2,300 for the most valuable brand ever built. Candler was a genius at promotion. He distributed thousands of free sample coupons, radical for the era. He covered Atlanta in oilcloth signs and streetcar ads. By the mid-1890s, Coca-Cola was sold in every state and territory in the country. Pemberton's son tried to profit from the formula too. He died in 1894, opium by his side. Pemberton's wife lived out her days in poverty. The creator of one of history's greatest fortunes died broke and addicted. It's a pattern we'll see again in this story. The $1 deal. Candler made one more decision that seems insane in hindsight. In 1899, 2 lawyers from Chattanooga approached him about bottling rights. Now, Candler was a fountain man. He didn't think bottles would matter much. He sold them the bottling rights for most of the United States. For $1. A single dollar. That contract became the foundation of one of the largest franchise systems on Earth. By 1916, the iconic contour bottle was designed, intentionally shaped so you could recognize it in the dark, or even identify it shattered on the ground. The Coca-Cola Company was built on a $2,300 acquisition and a $1 bottling deal. The scale of what grew from those 2 numbers is almost beyond comprehension. The medical school dropout. 7 years after Pemberton carried his jug to Jacob's Pharmacy, another pharmacist was mixing drinks behind another soda fountain counter. Different town, same story. Almost. Caleb Davis Bradham was born May 27, 1867, in Chinquapin, North Carolina. He enrolled at the University of Maryland School of Medicine. But his father's business went bankrupt. He had to drop out. He went back to North Carolina, taught school for a while, then opened a drugstore in New Bern with a soda fountain. In 1893, he started experimenting behind the counter. Cola nut extract, vanilla, rare oils, sugar, water, caramel, and lemon oil. His customers loved it. He called it Brad's Drink. On August 28, 1898, he renamed it Pepsi Cola. Pepsi from dyspepsia, indigestion. Cola from the cola nut. He was marketing it as a digestive aid. Despite what most people think, pepsin, the enzyme, was never actually an ingredient. 2 pharmacists, 2 southern towns, 2 soda fountains. both marketing their drinks as medicine, both accidentally creating global empires. Pemberton, a wounded war veteran looking for a morphine substitute. Bradham, a medical school dropout looking for a fresh start. The symmetry here is almost too perfect. Sugar, war, and the three refusals. Bradham built fast. By 1910, he had over 250 bottling franchises across 24 states. He was wealthy, respected, a bank president, a county commissioner. Then, World War I happened. Sugar was rationed. He couldn't produce enough syrup. When the war ended, sugar prices exploded from 3 cents a pound to 28 cents a pound. Bradham made a bet. He bought massive quantities at the peak price, convinced the market would hold. It didn't hold. Prices crashed. On May 31st, 1923, the Pepsi Cola Company declared bankruptcy. Now, pay close attention to this. This is one of the great what-if moments in business history. Because between 1922 and 1933, on 3 separate occasions, the owners of Pepsi Cola approached Coca-Cola and offered to sell. Coca-Cola said no, every single time. They didn't even make a bid. Now, think about everything that follows in this story. The Pepsi challenge, the celebrity endorsements, new Coke, billions of dollars in market warfare. All of it, every single bit of it, exists because Coca-Cola couldn't be bothered to buy a struggling regional soda brand for pocket change. 3 times. They said no 3 times. Bradham lost everything. He went back to his drugstore in New Bern. He quietly practiced pharmacy until he died on February 19, 1934. Just like Pemberton, the founder of a global empire, gone without a nickel. The grudge that built Pepsi. Pepsi's savior was a man with a personal vendetta. His name was Charles Guth. He ran a candy company called Loft Incorporated. Over 100 stores, all of them with soda fountains, all of them serving Coca-Cola. Guth asked Coca-Cola for a volume discount on syrup. They said no. Guth was furious. He pulled Coke from every single Loft store and went looking for a replacement. In 1931, Pepsi went bankrupt for the second time. Guth bought the company's assets for $10,500. He had his chemists rework the recipe. The product still struggled, until Guth made one radical decision. The Great Depression was at its very worst. People were counting every penny. Guth started selling Pepsi in 12-ounce bottles for 5 cents. Coca-Cola charged 5 cents for 6.5 ounces, twice as much for a nickel. That was the pitch. And it worked. The nickel jingle became the first advertisement ever broadcast coast to coast. Advertising Age later called it one of the most effective ads of the 20th century. By 1936, Pepsi was making $2 million in profit. It was now the second largest soft drink company in America. Notice something. Pepsi's identity, the scrappy underdog, the value brand, the choice for regular people counting their nickels, was born in the Depression. Coke was the establishment. Pepsi was for everyone else. That brand DNA would persist for decades. And it would eventually be weaponized. Part 2. The Generation Game. The King's Ransom. Coming out of World War II, Coca-Cola was dominant, roughly 60% of the American soft drink market. Pepsi, despite the Depression-era gains, was still seen as the bargain brand, popular in kitchens, rarely served in parlors. Then, in the 1950s, Pepsi got a new CEO named Alfred Steele. His wife was actress Joan Crawford, and Crawford became the public face of Pepsi's repositioning. Quality, not value. Style, not price. But the real revolution came in 1963. Pepsi's creative director was a man named Alan Potash. He looked at everything Coca-Cola was doing, the Norman Rockwell imagery, the small towns, the nostalgia, the wholesome Americana. And he said, "That's the past. We are the future." The new ads showed young people on motorcycles, water skiing, piloting gliders through desert canyons. The tagline was, "For those who think young." The message was electric. There are Coke people and there are Pepsi people. And if you're a Pepsi person, you are young. The future belongs to you. This was revolutionary. Pepsi wasn't competing on product anymore. It was competing on identity. Coke sold a drink. Pepsi sold a tribe. The Pepsi Generation campaign drove a 15% jump in sales within its first year. Coke had to respond. In 1971, they did. 65 young people from different countries standing on an Italian hillside, singing, "I'd like to buy the world a Coke." It was brilliant. Global unity, shared humanity. But notice something important. Coke was now on Pepsi's terrain, selling lifestyle, selling emotion, not the drink. The world's most dominant brand was playing defense. By the mid-1970s, Coca-Cola's lead had narrowed from 5-1 to about 1.5-1. Pepsi was outselling Coke in American supermarkets. The war was on. The king of pop. In 1983, Pepsi made a move that changed marketing forever. CEO Roger Enrico signed Michael Jackson to a $5 million endorsement deal. At the absolute peak of Thriller-era superstardom, it was the largest celebrity endorsement in history. The commercial debuted during the Grammy Awards in 1984, Jackson and the Jacksons dancing through a street party, singing Pepsi lyrics to the tune of Billie Jean. It didn't just sell soda, it sold a cultural identity. Pepsi was the drink of the future, the drink of the coolest human alive, the drink of the generation that was about to inherit the world. The production almost ended in tragedy. On January 27, 1984, during filming at the Shrine Auditorium in Los Angeles, pyrotechnics accidentally set Jackson's hair on fire. Second-degree burns to his scalp. Pepsi settled out of court. Jackson donated the $1.5 million to a burn center and continued the partnership. Now, before this deal, celebrities appeared in ads. But after this deal, celebrities became the ad. Pepsi didn't hire Michael Jackson to talk about how good Pepsi tasted. They hired him so that Pepsi and Michael Jackson became the same thing, the same signifier of cool. Every celebrity brand deal you've ever seen traces its lineage to that moment. Beyoncé, Travis Scott, Kendall Jenner, all children of Pepsi, 1984. Pepsi followed Jackson with Lionel Richie, Tina Turner, David Bowie, and Gloria Estefan. It was a full-spectrum cultural assault. And it was working. Part 3. The Pepsi Challenge. A table, 2 cups, a nation's debut. But before Michael Jackson and before the celebrity arms race, there was something simpler. and far more devastating. In 1975, Pepsi launched what may be the most audacious marketing campaign ever created. They called it the Pepsi Challenge. It was almost insultingly simple. At malls, shopping centers, supermarkets, and fairs across America, a Pepsi representative would set up a table. 2 unmarked white cups. One contained Pepsi, the other contained Coca-Cola. Taste both. Pick your favorite. They started in Dallas, Texas, deep in the heart of cola country, specifically to test whether Southern loyalty to Coke was about taste or about habit. The results stunned everyone. A majority of tasters chose Pepsi. But more devastating than that, roughly half of self-identified Coke drinkers chose Pepsi in the blind taste. Their own tongue betrayed them. Pepsi rolled it out nationwide. Real people on TV, genuine shock on their faces. The surprise wasn't performed. It was real. And it was everywhere. Coca-Cola, again, was caught playing defense. The genius of the Pepsi Challenge is what it did to the conversation. Forget brand identity. Forget lifestyle marketing. Forget nostalgia. Close your eyes. Taste both. Your own tongue will tell you the truth. Except, of course, the whole thing was itself advertising. That's the punchline buried inside the campaign. The call to trust yourself over advertising was itself advertising. The science behind the sip. But here's what Pepsi didn't tell anyone, and what took scientists years to figure out. The Pepsi Challenge wasn't a scientific study. It had serious methodological problems. Canadian journalist Malcolm Gladwell laid out the core issue in his 2005 book, Blink. Human taste buds naturally prefer the sweeter of the two beverages in a single sip. Pepsi is measurably sweeter than Coca-Cola. In a sip test, sweetness wins. But over an entire can, many people actually prefer the less sweet option. The challenge never measured that. It only measured a sip. There were other problems too. The Pepsi cup was labeled M. The Coke cup was labeled Q. Some researchers believe letter preference influenced results. The drinks were sometimes served at slightly different temperatures. A 2005 study in the Journal of Sensory Studies found that in rigorous double-blind conditions, participants could not reliably distinguish between the two colas at all. None of this mattered. The challenge was marketing, not science. And, as marketing, it was devastating. Pepsi's U.S. market share climbed from 23.3% in 1975 to 31.7% by 1984. Coca-Cola's fell from 60.5% to 38.8% over the same period. From 60% dominance to under 40% in under a decade. Coca-Cola's market share data was, by any measure, terrifying. The Pepsi paradox. But here's the great paradox buried in all of this. The challenge worked brilliantly as marketing, but failed as conversion. People heard the message, were intrigued, maybe they even would try Pepsi, and then went right back to buying Coke. The challenge moved the needle on awareness and market share, but it never achieved what Pepsi really wanted. It never made Coke drinkers permanently switch. That puzzle haunted Pepsi for decades, and eventually, neuroscientists figured out why. In a famous study, researchers ran blind taste tests. Results slightly favored Pepsi when they told participants which brand they were drinking and scanned their brains. When people knew they were drinking Coke, the prefrontal cortex lit up dramatically. That's the part of the brain associated with memory, identity, and self-image. Pepsi could win the tongue, but Coke owned the brain. People didn't just drink Coke. They felt like Coke drinkers. That emotional identification was stronger than any taste preference. Coca-Cola understood this, maybe not consciously, but at the deepest structural level of its brand. Pepsi never did. That failure of understanding is the thread that runs through everything that follows. Part 4. Project Kansas. The D-Day Memo. By 1984, Coca-Cola's senior leadership was in a state of controlled panic. CEO Roberto Goizueta, a Cuban-born chemical engineer, commissioned a top-secret project. Marketing VP Sergio Zyman and Coca-Cola USA President Brian Dyson ran it. They called it Project Kansas. The name came from a famous photograph of a Kansas journalist named William Allen White drinking a Coke. The image hung in multiple Coke executives' office as a symbol of pure Americana. Internal documents compared the project to the Allied invasion of Normandy. In its size, scope, and boldness, it is not unlike the Allied invasion of Europe in 1944. Project Kansas quite simply must not fail, according to a Coca-Cola internal Project Kansas document from 1984. A soft drink company comparing a recipe change to D-Day. This is the level of institutional anxiety we're dealing with. They weren't adjusting a product. In their minds, they were defending Western civilization from a soda. 200,000 taste tests. Coca-Cola spent the equivalent of roughly $12 million in today's money testing the new formula. They tested it on nearly 200,000 consumers. The results were overwhelming. The sweeter new formula beat both original Coke and Pepsi in blind taste tests by significant margins. One bottling partner was so enthusiastic, he threatened to sue if they didn't release it. The numbers looked great. Goizueta was convinced. But buried in the data was a signal, one that management chose to ignore. About 10 to 12% of testers reacted with anger, not dislike. Anger. They felt betrayed by the very idea of changing the formula. In focus groups, these angry testers exerted powerful pressure on everyone else, skewing group results negative even when individual surveys were positive. Management took the number they wanted and buried them when they didn't. 10 to 12% doesn't sound like a lot, until you realize who those people are. They are your most passionate consumers. They are your most vocal advocates. They don't just buy Coke, they identify with it. Sergio Zyman later admitted the taste tests measured preference correctly, but failed completely to measure emotional stakes. You can't survey someone into telling you how they'll feel about losing something. Like Joni Mitchell says, they don't know what they've got until it's gone. April 23, 1985. One more thing happened before the announcement. Robert Woodruff, the legendary former CEO who had built Coca-Cola into an international institution, had reportedly sworn the formula would never change. In March 1985, 1 month before the announcement, he died. He was 95 years old. Goizueta claimed he had secured Woodruff's blessing for the change. Many inside the company doubted the ailing Woodruff fully understood what he was agreeing to, and we'll never know for certain. On April 23, 1985, Goizueta walked to that podium at the Lincoln Center. He described the new taste as bolder, rounder, and more harmonious. Production of the original formula stopped that week. In the audience, Pepsi's planted reporters were feeding hostile questions to the press. At PepsiCo headquarters, Enrico gave employees the day off. He declared that Coke had effectively surrendered. Pepsi planting questions at a Coca-Cola press conference. This was not genteel competition. This was corporate psychological warfare. And Enrico's victory lap was real. He genuinely believed the war was over. 79 days of national outrage. The backlash was immediate. It was volcanic. It began in the American South, where Coca-Cola isn't just a beverage. It's a piece of regional identity. In the South, as fundamental as barbecue and college football. In much of the South, the word Coke, lowercase, is used generically for all soft drinks, any soft drink. That's how deep this connection runs. Coca-Cola's 1-800 hotline received over 400,000 calls, nearly all of them angry. People hoarded cases of original Coke. They poured new Coke into sewers in Seattle. A group called the Old Kilna Drinkers of America organized protests. Another group, the Society for the Preservation of the Real Thing, formed to demand reversal. At the Houston Astrodome, new Coke advertisements were booed. On the black market, original Coke was hoarded and sold at prohibition-style markups. One letter to the CEO read, "The signature of one of the dumbest executives in American history should be worth a fortune someday." The reaction to New Coke is usually described as a marketing failure. But it's much deeper than that. It was a cultural identity crisis. People weren't angry because their soda tasted different. They were angry because someone had taken something they considered theirs. A piece of their childhood, their family dinners, their sense of home, and they replaced it without asking. The data said the new formula was better. The people said the data could go to hell. July 11th, 1985. The comeback. After 79 days, Coca-Cola surrendered. On July 11th, 1985, the company announced the return of the original formula. They called it Coca-Cola Classic. New Coke would remain on shelves right next to it. The 1-800 hotline received 18,000 calls that day. Calls of gratitude. One caller said it felt like a lost friend had come home. Coca-Cola's stock price surged to its highest level in 12 years. And here's the part that makes this story extraordinary. The new Coke debacle may have been the best thing that ever happened to Coca-Cola. Before New Coke, 36.3% of consumers preferred Coke or drank it exclusively, versus 33.5% for Pepsi. A narrow, vulnerable gap. After the crisis, that gap widened dramatically. The controversy forced millions of casual drinkers to confront a question they had never really asked themselves. How much do I actually care about Coca-Cola? The answer for a surprising number of people was much more than I realized. Within 6 months of the return, Coke Classic was outselling both New Coke and Pepsi by enormous margins. By the end of 1985, Coca-Cola Classic was the dominant cola in America. Coca-Cola had inadvertently reminded an entire nation why they loved Coke, by briefly taking it away. This led to persistent conspiracy theories that the whole thing was a deliberate marketing ploy, that Coke engineered the outrage intentionally to boost brand loyalty. Coca-Cola's president, Don Keough, gave the definitive rebuttal. We're not that smart, and we're not that dumb. Pepsi won every battle. The taste tests, the celebrity endorsements, the youth market, the forced formula change. And Coca-Cola won the war by accident. Through a blunder so colossal that it accidentally proved the one thing Pepsi could never match. Emotional depth. People don't love Pepsi the way they love cola. They admire Pepsi, they respect the challenger, but they feel Coke. Roger Enrico, the Pepsi CEO who gave his employees the day off in celebration, later offered what may be the most honest epitaph for the whole saga. I think by the end of their nightmare, they figured out who they really are: caretakers. They can't change the taste of their flagship brand. They can't change its imagery. All they can do is defend the heritage they nearly abandoned in 1985. Roger Enrico, CEO, PepsiCo. Part 5. The Long Aftermath. The numbers tell the story. Let's step back and look at the full picture. According to Beverage Digest's 2008 report, Coca-Cola held 42.7% of the U.S. carbonated soft drink market. PepsiCo held 30.8%. By 2023, Coca-Cola brands held around 44% of the U.S. market versus Pepsi's 25%. Globally, Coca-Cola commands roughly 50% of the world soft drink market. Pepsi, approximately 20%. At the individual brand level, the gap is even more stark. Coke Classic has held 17 to 20% of the U.S. market share since 1995. Pepsi has declined from 15% in 95 to about 8.3% in 2023. At which point, it was nearly tied by Dr. Pepper as America's second most popular soda. Not Pepsi, Dr. Pepper. The Coca-Cola brand alone is valued at roughly $74 to $98 billion. Pepsi's brand value, roughly $19 billion. Total American Pepsi sales never overtook Coca-Cola, with one narrow exception: 1985. During the chaos of New Coke, when Coke sales were fractured between two formulas. 1 year, one big exception. The exception that proves the rule. The war Pepsi actually won. But here's the most interesting wrinkle in the whole story. PepsiCo, the corporation, did surpass the Coca-Cola company in total revenue. Not by beating Coca-Cola, but by merging with Frito-Lay in 1965. Today, more than half of PepsiCo's revenue comes from snack foods, not beverages. Lay's, Doritos, Cheetos, Fritos. Pepsi never beat Coke at Coke, but PepsiCo figured out something Coca-Cola never did. You don't have to beat Coca-Cola if you diversify into everything people eat alongside it. The Frito-Lay merger was the real weapon. The Cola War was the distraction. In a strange way, Pepsi lost the war it started, and won a different war entirely: the snack food war, which nobody wrote books about, because it wasn't glamorous. But it did work. Coda, breathtaking. $1 million for a tilted stripe. And now, a coda. This is a postscript so strange that it reads like satire, but I assure you that every single word of it is real. In October 2008, Pepsi announced it was redesigning its logo. The company hired the Arnell Group, a New York brand consultancy. The contract was worth $1 million. The agency's founder, Peter Arnell, produced a 27-page design strategy document. He titled it Breathtaking. The document was leaked on Reddit in 2009 by someone claiming to be an industry freelancer. It became one of the most infamous documents in the history of graphic design. The first few pages are reasonable enough. An overview of the golden ratio, the history of the Pepsi logo, standard branding language. And then it goes off the rails. The document invokes 5,000 years of design philosophy. From Pythagorean spatial harmonies to Renaissance art, it introduces the concept of perimeter oscillations as the, quote, DNA of the Pepsi brand. It introduces the Pepsi planet, the Pepsi galaxy, the Pepsi universe. It explains Earth's geodynamo, the naturally occurring electric generator that sustains the planet's magnetic field. And it claims this inspired the Pepsi logo. It maps the logo onto Da Vinci's Vitruvian Man and the Mona Lisa. It invokes the golden ratio, the Fibonacci sequence, and what the document calls the positive and negative definite matrices and optimization theorem. The result of all this cosmic reasoning? Pepsi's same red, white, and blue circle, but with the white stripe in the middle tilted at a slightly different angle. $1 million to move a white stripe a few degrees, justified by citing the gravitational pull of the Earth, the Mona Lisa, and 5,000 years of intellectual history. Peter Arnell told Ad Age he spent a month in Asia studying the design. The Arnell Group has never denied the document is real. Many people assumed it was a hoax. It was not a hoax. The Coda to the Coda. The redesigned logo launched in 2009, and it ran until 2023, when Pepsi redesigned its logo again. This time, they returned the white stripe to its original shape, which was widely interpreted as an implicit acknowledgement that the 2008 redesign had been a misstep. Pepsi's statement was carefully diplomatic. The visual identity introduced in 2008 has been very successful for us over the past 14 years. That said, in 2023, we introduced the next era of Pepsi. 14 years of Mona Lisa gravitational pull, then quietly reversed. The breathtaking document continues to circulate on social media. TikTok recreations, graphing calculator parodies, genuine shock from people seeing it for the first time. It has become, in a strange way, more famous than the logo it was designed to justify. So, what did we just witness? We saw a 100-year war between two pharmacists' accidents, both born from desperation, both built by men who never got to enjoy what they'd created. We watched the challenger win every tactical battle, the taste tests, the celebrity endorsements, the generation war, and lose the strategic one, the deciding battle. Because Pepsi failed to understand something fundamental. Winning on logic doesn't beat winning on love, on emotional connection. You can prove your product is better and still lose. Because people don't choose with their tongues. They choose with their memories, with their childhoods. They choose with who they believe themselves to be and what they identify with. Coke's logo hasn't fundamentally changed since 1887. It doesn't need a 27-page document invoking the Mona Lisa, the Vitruvian Man, or the geodynamo governing Earth's magnetic field. It doesn't need to reinvent itself. It just needs to be itself. And that's probably the final lesson of the Cola Wars. The company that never stopped trying to reinvent itself lost to the company that refused to. And the only time the winner tried to reinvent itself is when they almost lost. Pepsi won the battle of cool multiple times over, but Coke won the war of memory. And, in the end, memory beats cool every time. The Coca-Cola company still holds roughly 44% of the U.S. carbonated soft drink market. Its brand is valued between $74 and $98 billion. The Pepsi brand sits at around $19 billion. PepsiCo, the corporation, is fine. Frito-Lay made sure of that. But the Cola War, that ended a long time ago. Coke won. By accident. Through a blunder so spectacularly wrong that it accidentally proved everything right. Next time on Corporate Wars, we go to a McDonald's. Not the McDonald's you know. The very first one. A small burger stand in San Bernardino, California. Run by two brothers who invented the fast food assembly line, and then made the mistake of letting a milkshake machine salesman through the front door. His name was Ray Kroc. He was 52 years old and had failed at nearly everything he'd ever tried to do. And he was about to build the largest restaurant empire in the history of the world. Not by inventing anything, but by taking what two brothers built and making it his. A story about ambition, about contracts written in bad faith, and about what happens when the man who sells you your dream turns out to be better at dreaming than you are. McDonald's, Ray Kroc, The Franchise Wars. That's next on the regular season of Corporate Wars. Visit us online at corporatewarspod.com. There, you can listen to embedded episodes hosted on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever else fine podcasts are downloaded. And find links to follow us on social media. Thank you for listening. I'm Thomas Levkremzo, and I'll see you in the boardroom.